Week 17 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few receivers I looked at off the wire this week. The first guy, Demarcus Robinson. The Los Angeles Rams said Demarcus Robinson, the last month of the season, he's really emerged for this Los Angeles Ram team with double-digit fantasy points, and he found the end zone as well in all those ball games. So week 13 versus Cleveland, 4 catches, 55 yards, a touchdown. Week 14 in Baltimore, 3 catches, 46 yards, a TD. Week 15 versus the Commanders, 2 catches, 44 yards, a touchdown, a rush, 23 yards. In week 16 versus Saints, 6 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. Week 17, a great matchup with the Giants. Give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers on the season. So Robinson, he's been a good third wide receiver for this team. Obviously, when you got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that one-on-one coverage or even zone coverage where the field is open for Robinson to make plays are going to be available, and that's exactly been the case for D-Rob over the last few weeks. So right now, he's definitely a wide receiver, making big plays, putting up fantasy points, and they're this week available in 90% of fantasy leagues. Next wide receiver is DJ Chark at the Carolina Panthers. So DJ Chark, last week he finally had a big game where the whole season we really haven't seen much out of Chark. But this Panther team had their best game of the year, putting up 30 points in a tough loss versus the Green Bay Packers. And Chark went out there and had 6 catches, 98 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But still, DJ Chark, he's not really a wide receiver I'm going to have confidence in putting in my starting lineup next week, but definitely someone to pick up. Obviously, of course, he could bring some bench depth for fantasy owners. And if your opponent gets him and by chance he goes off, you don't want to have that to happen. So this week with a good matchup on paper at the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of his former teams that give up the 10th most fantasy points to wideouts on the year. You know Chark's going to want to go out there and show up the team that drafted him in the Jacksonville Jaguars. And him and Bryce Young have worked on their rapport over the last few weeks. If you need a receiver, I think Chark's a decent ad, available in 93% of fantasy leagues. The next wide receiver is Rashid Shaheed of the New Orleans Saints. So Shaheed, it's been a decent rookie season for him, and we know he's a deep ball threat and nothing for the most part for this Saint team. So the last few weeks, Shaheed didn't do much. In week 13 and 14, he had a goose egg. Then week 15, 3 catches, 36 yards. But week 16, he had a nice ball game, and that one was Shaheed, 5 catches, 70 yards, and found the end zone. So Michael Thomas, it's a possibility he might return in this game here for the New Orleans Saints. By Shaheed, he's been a big play receiver all season, like I mentioned. He's got a knack for that deep ball, and he's got a knack for the end zone as well, is the youngster. 4 touchdowns on 41 catches this season. So right now, if you need a wideout and a guy who could be a big boom or a bust type of wideout, he's available right now, is Shaheed in 56% of fantasy leagues. Next receiver is KJ Osborne of the Minnesota Vikings. So we saw in that week 16 ball game versus the Detroit Lions, Jordan Addison left the game, unfortunately. You don't know if he's going to play in next week's game. But Nick Mullins, he was getting the ball to KJ Osborne, and he had a big ball game. After the last 6 weeks of the season, he didn't do much with Osborne. But a big game in week 16, 5 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. So if Addison misses time, he's going to be a decent add is KJ Osborne. A good matchup versus the Packers, where their secondary over the last few weeks, they've been giving up a lot of yards and giving up points. If you need a receiver, Osborne available right now in 84% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final wideout I looked at off the wire is Darius Slayton of the New York Giants. Darius Slayton, I know this season really hasn't been good, and I know this Giant team, not many receivers have done anything at all besides a few pop games here and there, but the last 2 weeks he has double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues here. Slayton, week 15 at the Saints in that game, 4 catches, 63 yards. And week 16 at Philly, I know he caught a long touchdown down the sidelines to get the majority of his points, 3 catches, 90 yards in that one. So Slayton, we know last season was a decent receiver for this Giant team. Injuries have held him back over the last couple seasons of really being a breakout performer, but he's definitely a receiver with good hands and good route running ability. So week 17, a pretty good matchup versus the Rams. They give up the 15th most fantasy points to wideouts on the season. So right now, Slayton available in 98% of fantasy leagues. That's a few wide receivers I looked at off the wire in a big week 17 of the fantasy football season.